In a quiet village stood an old, lonely mansion. Its walls were cracked, and the windows were covered with dust. Mr. Edwin, a retired teacher, lived there all alone. Every night, the house was silent, except for the wind whistling through the broken windows. Edwin enjoyed the peace, but deep inside, he often felt uneasy. One night, as the clock struck 12, he heard a faint knock at the front door. At first, he thought it was the wind, but the sound was too clear. Edwin hesitated, but when he opened the door, no one was there. A strange chill ran down his spine, and he quickly locked the door. The next night, Edwin tried to forget about the knock. He told himself it was just his imagination. But at midnight, the same sound came again, a soft, steady knock. This time, Edwin peeked through the window before opening the door. He froze when he saw a shadowy figure standing still. The figure wore a long coat and a wide hat, but its face was hidden in the darkness. Edwin called out, "Who are you?" "What do you want?" There was no reply. Gathering his courage, he opened the door, but the shadow had disappeared into the night. That night, as Lily lay in bed, she felt a deep sense of calm. The mansion was quiet, but not in a way that felt empty. It was a quiet filled with contentment and the promise of new beginnings. She closed her eyes, and for the first time since her arrival, she felt completely at ease. There were no more shadows lurking in the corners, no more visitors to frighten her. The mansion was finally at rest. In her dreams, Lily saw a figure, Edwin, standing at the edge of the garden, smiling at her with kindness. He was not a ghost, but a memory, a part of the house's story that would never be forgotten. He nodded at her, as though giving her his final blessing. When Lily woke the next morning, she knew that the chapter of the silent visitor was over. The mansion had given her everything she needed: peace, understanding, and a place to call home. And she was ready to embrace whatever new life awaited her. One afternoon, as Lily was working in the garden, she noticed a figure walking up the long path leading to the mansion. At first, she thought it was just a traveler, but as the figure drew closer, Lily recognized the familiar face of a friend, Charlotte, a childhood companion who had once visited the house long ago. Charlotte had heard about the changes in the mansion and wanted to see it for herself. She had been skeptical about the house's mysterious reputation, but when she saw the peace that now enveloped it, she smiled. "I can't believe how much it's changed," Charlotte remarked, taking in the peaceful surroundings. "It feels alive in here," Lily nodded, a warm smile spreading across her face. "It is alive." And it's home. As Charlotte and Lily spent the day talking and reminiscing, the conversation shifted to the mansion's past. Charlotte, ever curious, asked about the rituals and the spirits that had once haunted the place. Lily shared everything: the spirits she had freed, the ancient book, and the final ritual. Charlotte listened intently, her eyes wide with awe and disbelief. "But the most surprising part," Lily said softly, "is that I've learned so much about myself through all of this. I've grown in ways I never imagined. The house has taught me patience, understanding, and strength." Charlotte smiled, impressed. "You've really found peace here, haven't you?" Lily nodded, her gaze drifting toward the mansion's tall windows. "I have." Later that evening, as the sun set behind the mansion, Lily stood by the window, gazing out at the landscape. She felt a presence beside her and turned to find Charlotte standing silently. "Do you feel it?" Charlotte asked, her voice hushed. "There's something here, isn't there?" Lily smiled, a peaceful look crossing her face. "Yes, there's a presence. But it's no longer the restless spirits or the fear we once felt. It's a blessing. The house has finally found its peace, and so have I. The moonlight filled the room, casting a soft glow on everything. Lily knew, deep in her heart, that the mansion's transformation was not just physical but spiritual. She had set the spirits free, and in return she had found peace in the silence. Edwin couldn't sleep after the second visit. He stayed up, thinking about the shadow. Was it a lost traveler or something more sinister? The next morning, he asked his neighbors if they had seen anyone strange. They all shook their heads, saying the village was safe and quiet. That night, Edwin kept a candle burning and waited by the window. As the clock struck 12, the knock came again. This time it was louder. When he looked outside, the figure was standing even closer. Edwin's heart raced, but he stayed inside. The knock continued until the candle burned out, leaving the house in darkness. The fourth night, Edwin decided to leave a note on the door. It read, "Who are you? What do you want from me?" He placed it on the doorstep and waited. At midnight, the knock came once more. Edwin stayed hidden, watching from a corner. When the knocking stopped, Edwin cautiously opened the door. On the fifth night, Edwin gathered his courage and decided to confront the visitor. When the clock struck 12, he opened the door as soon as the knock came. The figure stood there, silent and still. "What help do you need?" Edwin asked, his voice trembling. The figure slowly raised its hand and pointed towards the forest. A cold wind blew past Edwin, carrying a faint whisper, "Follow me," but before Edwin could take a step, the figure vanished like smoke. Edwin stood there, unsure if he should follow the path or stay safe inside his home. Edwin couldn't sleep after the shadowy figure disappeared. Its whispered words, "Follow me," echoed in his mind. The next evening, he stood near the edge of the forest, staring at the dark trees. He wanted to ignore the visitor's strange request, but curiosity pulled him in. At midnight, the knocking came again. This time, Edwin didn't hesitate. He opened deeper into the forest. Edwin stumbled upon a clearing. The moonlight lit up the area, revealing an old, abandoned well in the center. He stopped and looked around, hoping to see the figure. Instead, the air grew colder, and a low whisper floated past his ears. "Look inside," it said. Edwin hesitated but leaned over the well's edge. It was dry, but deep at the bottom, he noticed something shiny. It looked like a locket. Before he could react, a sudden gust of wind made him stumble back. The forest grew eerily quiet, as if it were holding its breath. The next morning, Edwin returned to the well with a rope. After tying it securely, he climbed down to retrieve the locket. It was old and covered in dirt, but when he cleaned it, he saw a small photograph inside. It was of a young girl, smiling brightly, but her eyes seemed sad. "Who is this girl?" Edwin asked, holding up the locket. The figure didn't move but pointed at the well in the forest. Edwin nodded, understanding that he needed to return. The figure vanished, leaving a chilling silence behind. The next day, Edwin went back to the clearing. This time, he noticed strange markings around the well. It looked like an old symbol, worn away by time. Suddenly, Edwin heard a soft, sorrowful voice, "Thank you for finding me." He turned, but no one was there. That night, Edwin sat in his chair, clutching the locket. As midnight approached, he felt a strange calmness. The knock came, But when Edwin opened the door, the figure was gone. In its place stood a soft glow shaped like a young girl. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice gentle. "I was lost for so long," Edwin realized. She was the girl from the locket, her spirit finally at peace. The glow faded into the night, leaving Edwin alone but with a sense of closure. After the girl's spirit vanished, Edwin thought his life would return to normal. But that night, he had a vivid dream. He saw the young girl standing by the well, her eyes filled with sadness. "There is more to be found," she whispered. "Please help me." Edwin woke up in a cold sweat, her voice still echoing in his ears. Determined to uncover the truth, Edwin decided to return to the well one last time. As he prepared to leave, the locket on his table began to glow faintly. He took it with him, feeling it might lead him to the answers he needed. Back at the clearing, the forest felt heavier, as if it was holding a dark secret. Edwin stood near the well and noticed something he hadn't seen before: a small patch of disturbed earth beside the well. He grabbed a stick and began digging carefully. After a few minutes, Edwin uncovered a rusty metal box. Edwin took the letters back to his house and read them by candlelight. They told the story of a girl named Clara, who had once lived in the mansion with her family. One winter, her family disappeared mysteriously, leaving her alone. Clara often wandered into the forest, searching for them. One letter, written in shaky handwriting, hinted at a terrible truth. It spoke of a betrayal by someone close to the family, leading to their disappearance. Clara's final letter ended abruptly, as if she had been interrupted while writing. Edwin realized the mansion and the forest held more secrets than he had imagined. That night, Edwin stayed awake, waiting for midnight. He held the locket tightly, knowing Clara's spirit might return. When the knock came, it was softer this time. At the well, Clara's spirit appeared again, more solid than before. "They're here," she whispered, pointing to the ground near the well. Edwin started digging once more, his hands trembling. To his horror, he unearthed bones buried deep in the earth. Clara's voice grew softer. "They never left," she said, her glow fading slowly. Edwin understood that these were the remains of her family, betrayed and buried long ago. As the first rays of dawn broke through the trees, Clara smiled faintly and disappeared, her spirit finally at peace. The mansion was never the same after that. Though Edwin stayed, the midnight knocks never came again. But sometimes, in the stillness of the night, he thought he heard a soft whisper of thanks drifting through the air. After Clara's spirit found peace, Edwin thought the haunting was over. But the mansion began to change. As he stared at it, the whispers grew louder, urging him to open it. Summoning his courage, Edwin opened the mysterious door. It creaked loudly, revealing a narrow staircase leading down into darkness. He hesitated, unsure if he should venture further. But the whispers seemed to push him forward, their tone growing more insistent. At the bottom of the stairs, Edwin found a small, hidden room. The walls were lined with dusty books and broken furniture. In the center of the room stood a wooden chest, sealed tightly with heavy chains. On the lid, a single word was carved. "Remember." Edwin felt a chill run through him as he touched the chest. Edwin tried to open the chest, but the chains were unyielding. Frustrated, he searched the room for anything that might help. On a nearby shelf, he found an old key wrapped in cloth. It was engraved. Edwin spent the next few hours reading the journal. It belonged to Clara's father, who had recorded the family's final days. The entries spoke of a trusted friend who betrayed them, luring them into the forest under false pretenses. The betrayal led to their deaths, leaving Clara behind. The last page was written in a hurry, its words almost illegible. It said, "The one who betrayed us still walks this land, bound to the mansion by their sins. Beware the restless visitor, for they seek what was lost." Edwin felt a deep sense of dread. Could the shadowy figure who knocked at his door be the betrayer? That night, Edwin prepared himself for whatever might come. He placed the dagger and the journal on the table, lighting candles around the room. As the clock struck 12, the familiar knock, the figure moved closer, its face still hidden. "I had no choice," it whispered. But now, neither do you. Before Edwin could react, the candles flickered and went out, plunging the house into darkness. In the silence, the whispers returned, louder than ever, surrounding him as the shadows stepped inside. The mansion was consumed by shadows, leaving Edwin unable to see anything. The figure's presence felt suffocating, as though it was draining the air from the room. "You brought me here," it whispered, its voice sharp and haunting. Now the debt must be paid. Edwin gripped the dagger tightly, his only sense of security in the encroaching darkness. "What debt?" he shouted. The figure didn't answer. Instead, the whispers grew deafening, swirling around him like a storm. Suddenly, the dagger grew cold in his hand, glowing faintly, as if it held some ancient. Edwin's mind raced. What curse? What did the figure mean by using the dagger? As the whispers continued, he noticed the locket glowing on the table. He grabbed it and held it tightly. Clara's voice echoed faintly in his mind, "Trust your instincts." Edwin looked back at the figure, realizing this was his moment to act. Edwin raised the dagger, its light pulsing in his hand. The figure let out a bone-chilling laugh. "Do you think you can defeat me?" it hissed. Edwin didn't answer. Instead, he focused on the locket, which now glowed in harmony with the dagger. Suddenly, a surge of memories flooded Edwin's mind, visions of Clara and her family, the betrayal and the figure's role in it all. The figure wasn't just a restless spirit, it was the embodiment of the betrayal, trapped by its guilt. Edwin stepped forward, holding the dagger steady. "This ends now," he said, plunging the blade into the figure. As the blade struck, the figure let out an unearthly scream. The room erupted with light, and the whispers turned into a deafening roar. The figure's shadowy form began to crack and splinter, like glass breaking under pressure. "You've released me," it whispered, its voice softening. The shadows receded, and the figure dissolved into nothingness. Edwin dropped the dagger, exhausted and overwhelmed. The room fell silent, and the air felt lighter, as though the mansion had finally exhaled after centuries of torment. But something told Edwin this wasn't the end. In the aftermath of the figure's disappearance, Edwin noticed the mansion was eerily calm. The locket, now dull and lifeless, sat on the table. He felt an overwhelming sadness, knowing Clara and her family's story was over, but their memory would remain with him forever. As he prepared to leave the mansion for good, Edwin heard one final whisper, "Thank you." It was Clara's voice, filled with peace and gratitude. The mansion seemed to hum softly, as if saying its own goodbye. Edwin stepped outside, feeling the weight of the curse lifted. The mansion stood in the distance, its windows dark and empty. Though it had taken so much from him, Edwin felt he had gained something priceless, the courage to face the unknown. The silent visitor would haunt him no more, but its story would live with him forever. Edwin had left the mansion behind, but something gnawed at his mind. The whispers had stopped, the figure was gone, and Clara had finally found peace, but there was still something unfinished about her story. The journal's final page had mentioned a truth that had yet to be revealed. What was it? He couldn't shake the feeling that he had missed something crucial. One evening he returned to the mansion, determined to uncover the last piece of the puzzle. The door creaked open as if it had been waiting for him, and the silence inside seemed heavier than before. Edwin wandered through the mansion, retracing his steps from before. He returned to the room where he had found the chest, thinking there might be something he had overlooked. That's when he saw a hidden door at the far corner, partially hidden by dust and cobwebs. It was an old wooden door, locked and untouched for years. The key he had used before wasn't the right one for this door, but something inside him told him that it was the last mystery to be solved. After searching the room again, Edwin found a second key, this one tucked behind a loose brick in the wall. With a steady hand, he unlocked the door, and beyond the door was a narrow hallway, and at the end of it, another small room. Inside, it was cold and dark, but something shone faintly in the corner. Edwin walked toward it and found an old portrait covered in dust. As he wiped away the grime, the face of a man became clear, a man who looked eerily familiar. It was the figure who had haunted the mansion, the one who had betrayed Clara's family. The painting was older, but there was no mistaking it. Edwin's heart raced. He had thought the curse was over, but it seemed there was more to be done. The betrayer's soul was not at rest, and neither was Clara's. The room seemed to close in on Edwin as the truth settled in. The figure he had encountered was not just a spirit, it was the manifestation of the betrayer's legacy. The man in the portrait had lived and died within these walls, never facing the consequences of his actions. He had been bound to the mansion, just as the spirits of Clara's family had been. Edwin realized that breaking the curse meant confronting this man's dark legacy. He searched the room and found a second journal. This one belonged to the betrayer. It detailed the events leading up to the betrayal and how the man had convinced Clara's family to trust him, only to betray them for wealth and power. The journal ended with a chilling note: "They will never escape, and neither will I." Edwin stood in front of the portrait, holding both journals in his hands. The weight of the truth was unbearable. He understood now that the betrayer's spirit was bound to the mansion by the lies and the murder he had committed. But Edwin had one last chance to end the curse forever. He took the journal of the betrayer and placed it next to the portrait. Then, he read aloud the last entry, hoping it would break the cycle. As he finished, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. A cold wind blew through the room, and the figure appeared once more, this time clearer than ever before. "Your time is up," Edwin said firmly. "You cannot hide from your sins anymore." The figure looked at him with hollow eyes, a whisper escaping its lips. "I am not finished," but Edwin stood his ground. "Yes, you are," he replied, his voice steady. With those words, the figure screamed, and the mansion shook. The portrait cracked, the walls groaned, and a flash of light filled the room. When the light faded, the figure was gone, leaving nothing but a lingering silence. The mansion was still, quieter than it had ever been. Edwin stood in the center of the room, taking in the complete silence around him. The whispers had vanished, and the heavy air that had once filled the halls was gone. For the first time in years, the house felt peaceful. The curse that had bound it was finally broken. Edwin looked around at the walls, no longer dark and oppressive, but free. The mansion had been the home of so much pain, yet now it felt as though it was being given a second chance. Clara's spirit had been set free, as had her family's. The truth had been revealed, and the betrayer's legacy was no longer a shadow hanging over them. That night, Edwin sat by the fireplace, reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought of Clara, her gentle spirit, and the sorrow she had carried for so long. He knew she was now at peace, no longer trapped in the mansion's endless cycle of torment. As he sat in the dim light, he felt a soft breeze move through the room. It was as if Clara's presence was still there, watching over him with gratitude. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Thank you." The warmth of the fire seemed to embrace him, and for the first time Edwin truly felt the weight of everything lift from his shoulders. Edwin made the decision to leave the mansion behind for good. He had freed the spirits that had been trapped there for so long. And now it was time for him to move on. The mansion would remain, but it would be a place of peace, no longer haunted by shadows of the past. As he walked away, Edwin felt the first stirrings of hope. He had faced the darkness and come out stronger. The mansion, once a place of fear, had now become a symbol of redemption and courage. He didn't know what the future held, but he was ready to face it. Days passed, and Edwin found himself in a quiet village far from the mansion. He had settled into a small home, far away from the echoes of the past. But even in his new life, he carried the lessons he had learned. He understood now that some burdens are too heavy to carry alone. As Edwin stood in the village square one bright morning, he smiled. The sun was shining, and the birds were singing. It was a new day, a new beginning. He knew he would never forget the mansion, but he also knew that he was no longer defined by the darkness that had once haunted him. Years later, Edwin returned to the mansion one last time. The house stood tall and proud, no longer a place of fear, but a place of quiet solitude. He entered the familiar doorway, the one that had once been filled with dread. In the center of the main hall, there was a single, delicate flower resting on the floor. It was a white lily, beautiful and pure. Edwin bent down to touch it, feeling a sense of peace wash over him. As he stood up, he heard a soft voice, just above a whisper. "Thank you for setting us free," Edwin smiled, his heart full. The silent visitor had finally found peace, and so had he. The mansion was no longer haunted by the past. It was a place of rest, a place where the echoes of the past were no longer loud, but faint, like a forgotten memory. And so Edwin walked away, knowing that the mansion was no longer a place of night. It was as if the mansion had been waiting for him to return. But why? What had been left behind? As Edwin explored the mansion, he noticed something new, a hidden room behind the old bookshelf. It had never been there before, at least not in his memory. Intrigued, he moved the bookshelf aside, revealing a dark passage. Without hesitation, he stepped inside. The passage led him deep beneath the house, to a hidden chamber that had been sealed for generations. In the center of the chamber was an altar, and on it lay an ancient book. It was thick, its pages worn with age, but it shimmered with a strange light. As Edwin approached the altar, the whispers returned, but this time they weren't coming from the walls. They came from the book itself. It was as if the mansion was telling him to open it, to uncover its final secret. Edwin opened the book, and as he did, the whispers grew louder, swirling around him like a storm. The words on the pages were written in a language he couldn't understand, but somehow he knew they were important. The book spoke of a pact, an ancient promise made by the betrayer to never truly let the spirits rest. It was then that Edwin realized the truth. The betrayer's curse had never been fully broken because the book had never been destroyed. It had been hidden away, keeping the spirits bound to the mansion. The mansion's haunted history had been passed down through the generations, its dark power lingering in the air, feeding on the souls of the lost. With the knowledge of the book's power, Edwin knew what he had to do. The curse could only be lifted if the book was destroyed, once and for all. But as he held the book in his hands, he felt a strong resistance, as if the mansion itself was trying to keep him from ending it. The air grew thick, and shadows began to gather around him. But Edwin wasn't afraid. He raised the book high, and with all his strength, he slammed it down onto the altar. The book shattered into pieces, and with it, the mansion let out a final, deafening scream. The walls cracked, and the ground beneath Edwin's feet trembled. As the book disintegrated into dust, the mansion fell silent. The whispers were gone. The air was still. Edwin knew, with certainty, that the curse was over. The mansion stood in eerie silence, its once foreboding presence now tranquil. Edwin stepped back from the altar, watching the dust settle where the cursed book had once lay. The air felt lighter, freer, as if the weight that had pressed down on the mansion for centuries had finally lifted. The oppressive darkness had faded, and for the first time, Edwin could hear the sounds of the world beyond the wind rustling the leaves, birds chirping in the distance. He took a deep breath, feeling the calm seep into his bones. The mansion, once a place of pain and sorrow, had finally been released from its chains. But as Edwin looked around, he couldn't help but wonder if this peace was permanent. The mansion was quiet, but would it stay this way forever? Or would another dark force rise to fill the void left behind? As Edwin wandered through the mansion, the realization dawned on him he couldn't just leave. He had come so far to break the curse, but the mansion was still a part of him, a chapter in his life that could never be erased. There was no one else to guard it now, no one else who understood its secrets. The mansion needed a new guardian, someone who would protect it from the shadows that once lurked within its walls. Edwin had not come this far only to walk away. He would stay, not as a prisoner of the mansion's past, but as its protector, a keeper of its peace. Word of Edwin's return to the mansion quickly spread through the village, and it wasn't long before another visitor arrived, one who was not expected. A young woman, carrying a basket of flowers, appeared at the gates. Her eyes were filled with curiosity, but there was something in her expression that hinted at an unspoken knowledge. "Are you the one who freed the spirits?" she asked, her voice gentle but steady. Edwin, taken aback by her question, nodded. The woman smiled faintly. "I've heard the stories. The mansion has always been more than just a house. It's a place of memories, both good and bad. My grandmother once lived here." The woman's name was Lily. And as she spoke, Edwin realized that she had a deep connection to the mansion, a tie that went beyond mere curiosity. She spoke of her family's past, of how her ancestors. It was clear that Lily, like him, felt a pull to the place, a need to understand its secrets. Lily returned to the mansion over the next few days, bringing flowers and old photographs from her family's past. As she and Edwin spent more time together, the history of the mansion began to unfold in ways neither had expected. Lily's family had played a significant role in the events that led to the curse, but unlike Edwin, they had never fully understood the consequences of their actions. Through their conversations, Edwin realized that there was still much more to learn about the mansion's past. The final pieces of the puzzle had not yet been found, and Lily's presence seemed to bring a new layer of understanding. Together, they uncovered more hidden rooms, more forgotten journals, and more clues that helped piece together the tragic history of Clara's family and the betrayer's legacy. But despite all they uncovered, there was still something elusive about the mansion's true nature. It was as if the house itself had a mind of its own, holding on to secrets even after the curse had been lifted. In the weeks that followed, Edwin and Lily's bond grew stronger. As they worked together to unravel the final mysteries of the mansion, Edwin began to realize that his purpose here was not just to guard the house, but to help others like Lily who were bound to its history. One evening, as they sat together in the main hall, Edwin turned to Lily with a question. "Do you ever feel like the mansion is alive?" Lily nodded. "I think it's more than just a building. It's a place where memories live, where past and present collide. Maybe it's not just the spirits of those who died that haunt it, but the spirits of everyone who's ever stepped through its doors." Edwin sat back, deep in thought. The mansion had given him peace, but it was also a place of great power, a power that could be used for good, or something else. With Lily by his side, he no longer feared what the mansion might become. He knew they could handle whatever came next, together. The mansion, now more than just a place of haunted memories, had become a home, a place where two souls bound by fate found solace in each other's presence. As time passed, Edwin and Lily became more attuned to the mansion's rhythms. They could hear the soft creaking of the floorboards, the whisper of wind through the old windows, and at times a faint murmur coming from the walls themselves. At first they dismissed it as the house settling, but as the whispers grew clearer, they realized there was something more at play. One night, as they sat in the library, a voice whispered through the stillness. "Help us." The voice was soft, distant, and yet filled with a deep sadness. It came from the very walls, as if the mansion itself was trying to speak to them. Lily looked at Edwin, her face pale. "Do you hear that?" she whispered. Edwin nodded. They both knew the mansion still held secrets, and perhaps it wasn't quite finished with them yet. The next morning, after the strange whisper, Edwin and Lily set out to explore more of the mansion. They knew there was more to uncover, and the voice seemed like a sign they had missed something important. As they explored the old servants' quarters, they noticed a strange draft coming from behind a large, dusty curtain. Pulling it aside, they found a narrow door hidden in the wall, barely visible in the dim light. Excited and cautious, they opened the door, revealing a hidden passage that led deep beneath the mansion. The passage was dark and cold, with a strange, unsettling energy that made the hairs on the back of their necks stand up. They descended into the darkness, guided only by the faint light of a lantern. The deeper they went, the stronger the feeling that they were being watched. The hidden passage led them to a forgotten chamber, one that had been sealed off for centuries. Dust and cobwebs filled the air, and the smell of old books and decay hung heavily in the room. On the far side of the chamber was an altar, similar to the one Edwin had seen years ago when he first uncovered the book. But this altar was different. It was adorned with strange symbols, symbols that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Lily stepped closer to the altar, her fingers tracing the symbols carved into the stone. "These aren't the same markings as before," she said, her voice filled with awe and fear. Edwin moved closer, inspecting the altar with growing unease. The symbols were ancient, and he knew they weren't meant to be uncovered. They had been hidden for a reason. As they examined the altar, a cold breeze swept through the chamber. Then, the voice that had whispered through the walls returned, but this time it was clearer and more urgent. "Free us," the voice cried. "Break the seal, and we will grant you what you seek." Edwin and Lily froze. The voice seemed to come from the very altar itself, as if the spirits of the past were bound to it. They felt an overwhelming presence, and it was clear that whatever had been sealed in this chamber was not something to be taken lightly. The spirits were offering them something, a bargain, perhaps, but at what cost? Lily took a step back, her heart pounding. "We need to be careful. This isn't just a spirit, it's something darker." Edwin nodded. He had a deep sense of dread settling in his chest. The mansion had always been a place of mystery, but this new revelation made him question everything he thought he knew. The whispers grew louder, the air growing colder with each passing moment. Edwin felt the weight of the mansion pressing down on him, the choice before him impossible to ignore. Should they break the seal and risk unleashing something far more dangerous than the curse they had? Lily turned to Edwin, her eyes filled with uncertainty. "What should we do?" she asked. Edwin took a deep breath, his mind racing. He knew they could not just walk away. They had come too far. But as he looked at the altar, the symbols glowing faintly, he realized the mansion was still a place of great power, and with great power came great responsibility. "We have to destroy it," Edwin said, his voice firm. "We freed the spirits once, but this is a threat that could harm more than just this place. We can't risk it with that." They made their decision. Together they would destroy the altar and seal away the darkness forever. It wasn't just about protecting the mansion anymore, it was about protecting the world from the shadows that lurked within. The decision to destroy the altar was not made lightly. Edwin and Lily knew that their actions would have far-reaching consequences, but there was no turning back now. They carefully examined the symbols on the altar, searching for a way to destroy the dark energy that had been sealed within it. Lily's eyes scanned the symbols, a sense of urgency building in her chest. "There's a pattern here," she said softly, tracing the symbols with her finger. "If we can break the pattern, the altar should lose its power." Edwin nodded, a plan beginning to form in his mind. It was risky, but they had no choice. They had to destroy it. Lily gathered the items they would need for the ritual: a vial of salt, a piece of parchment, and an ancient relic that had been passed down through her family. The relic, a small stone pendant, was said to have the power to disrupt dark magic. Edwin placed the vial of salt at the four corners of the altar as Lily began chanting softly, her voice barely above a whisper. The room seemed to grow colder with every word, the air thick with energy. As the ritual continued, the symbols on the altar began to shift, their glow intensifying. Edwin could feel the darkness rising, trying to fight back against their efforts. He clenched his fists, determined to see this through. Suddenly, the pendant in Lily's hand began to glow. The chamber trembled, and the walls seemed to shake. A deep, rumbling voice echoed through the room. "You cannot destroy what has already been bound." The voice grew louder, and Edwin could feel the pressure building, as if the mansion itself was fighting against them. Lily's hands trembled, but she held the pendant tight, chanting faster now. "We can't give up now," Edwin said through gritted teeth. "We're close, Lily. We have to finish it." The air grew heavy, and the temperature dropped so low that their breath became visible in the dim light. The whispers of the spirits turned into screams, their voices filled with rage and desperation. The very ground beneath them seemed to crack. But Lily pressed on, her voice unwavering as she finished the chant. With a final word, the pendant in Lily's hand erupted in a burst of light, and the altar shook violently. The symbols on the stone began to crack, their glow fading as the magic that had bound them started to unravel. The dark energy surged one last time, but it was no match for the power of the ritual they had performed. The altar shattered with a deafening crash, and for a moment everything went still. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive darkness lifted, leaving only a faint trace of the evil that had once filled the room. Edwin and Lily stood, breathless and exhausted, but relieved. "We did it," Lily whispered. The following morning, Edwin and Lily walked through the mansion, the sun's first rays streaming through the broken windows. The house was no longer a place of fear, but a place of healing. The spirits had been set free, and the dark magic that had once held the mansion in its grip was gone. As they stood in the main hall, the mansion seemed to hum with a new energy, peaceful and quiet, as if it had been reborn. Edwin turned to Lily, a smile tugging at the corner of his lips. "I think we can finally rest now." Lily smiled back, her eyes filled with gratitude and a quiet joy. "We've earned it for the first time in years." The mansion was truly at peace. The whispers had stopped, and the heavy presence that had once haunted its halls was gone. It was a new beginning, not just for the mansion, but for Edwin and Lily as well. As the sun rose higher in the sky, they knew that their journey was far from over. But whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, knowing that they had conquered the darkness and found the light within. As days passed, the mansion seemed to take on a new life. The rooms, once filled with shadows and fear, were now filled with light and warmth. Edwin and Lily had started rebuilding, not just the mansion, but their own lives. It was a slow process, but with each step they felt closer to truly freeing themselves from the past. They spent hours exploring the mansion, finding pieces of history that had been hidden away. Some parts of the house were still locked, and they wondered what else it might hold. But for now, they were content. The mansion was no longer a place of dread, it was a place of peace and possibility. One evening, as Edwin and Lily sat by the fireplace, a strange sensation filled the room. It was subtle at first, like a soft vibration in the air, but it soon became impossible to ignore. A chill swept through the room, and the fire flickered erratically. Lily stood up quickly, her senses alert. "Edwin, do you feel that?" she asked, her voice tight with unease. Before he could answer, the air seemed to thicken, and a soft, familiar whisper echoed from the shadows. "You cannot escape us." Edwin's heart raced. The spirits, the darkness, had returned, and with it, a sense of foreboding. What had they done wrong? Why had the peace they fought for been so fleeting? The whispers grew louder. and a shadow seemed to move across the walls. The temperature dropped again, and the once peaceful atmosphere in the mansion was replaced with an overwhelming sense of dread. Edwin and Lily exchanged a look, both of them understanding what this meant. "The seal," Edwin murmured. It wasn't enough. Lily's eyes widened as she realized the truth. The darkness they had thought they had sealed away was far more powerful than they had imagined. It had simply waited for the right moment to return, to claim the mansion and them once again. They needed to act quickly. But what could they do now? Determined not to let the mansion fall back into the grip of darkness, Edwin and Lily began searching for answers. They returned to the hidden chamber where the altar had been, hoping to find something they had missed. The room was as still as they had left it, but now it felt different. It felt as if it were alive, watching them. As they combed through the dust and old relics, Lily found an ancient book hidden beneath a pile of tattered scrolls. The book was bound in dark leather, its pages brittle with age. "This must be it," Lily whispered, her fingers trembling as she opened it. The book contained a spell, a powerful one, that could undo the darkness once and for all. But it came with a heavy cost. As they read through the ancient spell, a wave of uncertainty swept over them. The price for ending the darkness forever was steep. The spell required a sacrifice, a life, a soul to permanently bind the evil forces away from the mansion. Edwin and Lily stood in silence, the weight of the decision pressing down on them. "One of us must sacrifice everything," Edwin said, his voice heavy. "To truly end this, one of us has to give up their life." Lily's eyes filled with tears, and she shook her head. "I can't let you do that," she said softly. "But I don't know if I can live with this burden either." The mansion seemed to watch them, its silence deafening. The darkness loomed once again, waiting for them to make their choice. They had fought so hard to bring peace, but now it seemed the price for that peace might be too high. Edwin stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that once the ritual began, there would be no turning back. But he was ready. As Lily recited the final lines of the spell, Edwin stood by her side, prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. The dark presence in the mansion stirred, its power growing stronger as the ritual continued. He could feel the evil trying to fight back, but he held his ground. The shadows in the room twisted and writhed as the spell took effect. The dark force seemed to scream, but the sound was drowned out by the power of the ritual. The altar, still cracked from their previous attempts, began to glow once more. But this time, the light was different, stronger, purer. Lily's voice trembled as she completed the chant, the last words leaving her lips in a final, desperate cry. "By the blood of the fallen, by the sacrifice of the pure, bind the darkness forever." In that instant, the mansion shook violently. The walls cracked, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. The dark force let out one final, deafening scream, but it was no match for the power of the spell. Edwin stepped forward, his heart pounding in his chest. He knew that once the ritual began, there would be no turning back. But he was ready. As Lily recited the final lines of the spell, Edwin stood by her side, prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice. The dark presence in the mansion stirred, its power growing stronger as the ritual continued. He could feel the evil trying to fight back, but he held his ground. The shadows in the room twisted and writhed as the spell took effect. The dark force seemed to scream, but the sound was drowned out by the power of the ritual. The altar, still cracked from their previous attempts, began to glow once more, but this time the light was different, stronger, purer. Lily's voice trembled as she completed the chant, the last words leaving her lips in a final, desperate cry. By the blood of the fallen, by the sacrifice of the pure, bind the darkness forever. In that instant, the mansion shook violently. The walls cracked, and the floor trembled beneath their feet. The dark force let out one final, deafening scream, but it was no match for the power of the spell. As the ritual reached its climax, a brilliant light filled the room, blinding them both. For a moment, Edwin felt weightless, as if he were suspended between two worlds. The darkness seemed to be pulled from the mansion, spiraling into a void where it could never return. But as the light began to fade, Edwin collapsed to his knees. The room was silent, save for the sound of his ragged breathing. He had done it. The darkness was gone, but the price was steep. Lily rushed to his side, her heart breaking as she saw the toll the ritual had taken on him. "Edwin," she cried, shaking him gently. He looked up at her, his face pale but peaceful. "It's over, Lily," he whispered, a weak smile tugging at his lips. The mansion is free. The mansion, now completely still, was bathed in the soft glow of the early morning sun. The shadows had lifted, and the oppressive darkness that had once filled its halls was gone. Lily stood by the window, staring out at the world beyond. She had lost so much, but she had also gained something. The mansion was free, and so was she. She touched the pendant that still hung around her neck, a reminder of the sacrifice they had made and the price they had paid. As the sun rose higher, Lily made a silent promise. She would carry Edwin's memory with her always, honoring the courage and love that had saved them all. The mansion was quiet now, its haunting presence gone, and Lily knew that she could finally begin to heal. The days after the ritual were calm, but they felt different. The air was lighter, the mansion no longer burdened by the shadows that had once ruled it. Lily spent her days in quiet reflection, going through the house, trying to hold on to the memories of what had happened, both the good and the bad. One morning, as she walked through the garden, she noticed something new. Flowers bloomed where once there had only been dead vines. The sky was brighter, and the warmth of the sun felt more comforting than ever before. It was as though the world had been reborn, just as the mansion had. Lily took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past lift from her shoulders. It had been a long journey, but she was finally free. In the weeks that followed, Lily focused on healing. The mansion, though once a place of terror, became her sanctuary. She decorated the rooms with fresh flowers, and slowly, Edwin's absence was a painful reminder of the price they had paid, but it was also a reminder of his love and sacrifice. Every room in the house held a memory of him. His books, his favorite chair by the fireplace, and the small details he had cherished all served as tributes to the man who had saved her. Lily made a promise to herself she would live on, honoring Edwin's memory, and the peace they had fought for would never be forgotten. One evening, as Lily was cleaning the library, she came across a hidden drawer in Edwin's desk. Inside was a small, weathered box. It was locked, but the key was tucked beneath a pile of old papers. With trembling hands, she unlocked it. Inside the box were letters written by Edwin long before they had ever met. As she read through them, she realized that Edwin had known about the mansion's dark past long before he had come to live there. He had written about the spirits, the whispers in the night, and the ancient rituals he had studied. It was clear now that Edwin had always known the mansion's history. He had come to it with a purpose, and that purpose had been to protect her. As time passed, the mansion grew even quieter, and Lily found herself sleeping soundly for the first time in years. The nightmares that had once haunted her no longer came. She could walk through the hallways without feeling a cold chill at her back. Each night, she would light a candle in memory of Edwin, placing it in the center of the room where they had once performed the ritual. The soft flicker of the candle's flame reminded her of the light they had brought into the mansion. Though the darkness was gone, the love that had driven them to fight for this peace remained. And Lily knew that it would never fade. Months passed, and the mansion, now fully restored, became a place of refuge for those seeking peace. Lily had turned the house into a home once more, inviting those who needed comfort. The spirits that had once plagued the halls had been replaced by laughter, conversation, and warmth. Though she would always carry the pain of Edwin's loss, Lily knew that his love had left an indelible mark on the mansion and on her heart. It was a love that had brought light into the darkest of places. As Lily sat by the window, watching the sun set over the peaceful landscape, she smiled. The journey had been long, but it had been worth it. The mansion was no longer a place of horror. It had become a legacy of love, sacrifice, and peace. It was a quiet afternoon when Lily first heard the faint sound of whispering. At first, she thought it was just the wind, but it was different. The whispers were soft but distinct, calling her name in a familiar voice. Her heart skipped a beat as she slowly turned around, half expecting to see Edwin standing there. But there was no one. The house, though peaceful, still carried remnants of the past. Lily knew that even though the darkness had been banished, the memories would never fully fade. She walked slowly to the source of the whispers, the old study where Edwin had spent countless hours reading and researching. The whispers seemed to be calling from within. Inside the study, Lily found an old map tucked behind one of Edwin's books. It was covered in dust, and the edges were frayed from age. As she unrolled the map, she noticed something strange. The mansion wasn't just a house, it was part of something much larger, a network of forgotten paths and hidden places. The map marked locations deep within the surrounding woods, and some areas that seemed to be unreachable. Lily couldn't help but feel a sense of unease as she traced her finger along the lines. Could these places hold more secrets, or was it simply a relic of Edwin's past? The whispers grew louder as she studied the map. It was as though the mansion itself was trying to speak to her, urging her to uncover more of its hidden history. Determined to learn more, Lily set out to explore the woods that evening. As she walked through the dense trees, the whispers seemed to follow her, always just beyond her hearing. The air was thick with a strange energy, as though the past was alive around her. The deeper she ventured into the woods, the more the familiar feeling of unease returned. It was as if she were walking through a dream one she couldn't wake up from. The path, once clear, grew narrow, and the whispers became clearer, as though calling her to a place unknown. Suddenly, Lily stumbled upon a small, overgrown clearing. At the center stood a stone monument, half buried in. The stone monument seemed ancient, its surface covered with cryptic symbols. As Lily carefully brushed away the moss, she recognized some of the markings. They were the same symbols she had seen in Edwin's books. Her pulse quickened as she realized that the monument was not just a relic, it was a key. A key to unlocking the mansion's past and perhaps even the final pieces of the mystery Edwin had left behind. The whispers began again, louder this time, but Lily wasn't afraid. She pressed her hand against the stone, and as if by magic, it began to shift. The ground beneath her feet rumbled, and a hidden doorway opened in the earth below. The air smelled of ancient dust, and Lily knew she had discovered something that would change everything. With a mix of fear and curiosity, Lily descended into the darkness beneath the monument. The path was narrow, but the faint glow of her lantern guided the way. The walls were covered in strange markings, just like the ones on the stone monument. The deeper she went, the more the temperature dropped. It felt like she was stepping into another world, a place forgotten by time. She felt Edwin's presence with her, as though he were guiding her through this unknown path. At the end of the tunnel, Lily found herself standing in a vast underground chamber. In the center of the room was a large stone pedestal, and on it rested an ancient book, its pages yellowed with age. The book seemed to pulse with energy, and Lily knew this was the final piece of the puzzle, the true history of the mansion. Lily hesitated before touching the ancient book. It was as if the air around her had thickened, charged with a power she couldn't quite understand. The book seemed to beckon her, its pages calling out to her very soul. Slowly, she reached out and placed her fingers on the cover. As soon as her hand made contact, the room seemed to shift. A low hum vibrated through the air, and the ground beneath her feet trembled. The book's pages began to turn by themselves, revealing the hidden history of the mansion. Each page held secrets of the past rituals, lost souls, and the dark power that had once ruled these lands. Lily's heart raced as she read the words. It was clear now the mansion was not just a home, it was a nexus of dark energy, a place where the boundaries between life and death were thin. As Lily flipped through the pages, she came across a passage written in an ancient language she didn't recognize. The words seemed to pulse with an unnatural force, almost as though they were alive. Suddenly, a voice echoed through the chamber. "You should not have come here." The voice was deep, resonating with power. It was the voice of the mansion's guardian, the spirit that had watched over the house for centuries. Lily froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I am the protector of this place," the voice replied. "You have uncovered secrets that were meant to remain hidden. Now, you must choose leave and never return, or face the consequences." Lily stood in the chamber, torn between fear and curiosity. The guardian's words echoed in her mind, but there was something she couldn't shake, a feeling that this was her destiny, that she had been brought to this moment for a reason. "I can't leave now," Lily whispered. "I need to know the truth." The voice was silent for a moment before responding. "Very well. But remember, every truth comes with a cost." The chamber darkened, and the temperature dropped even further. Shadows seemed to stretch across the walls, swirling in the corners of the room. Lily felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread, but she stood her ground. The truth was within her reach, and she couldn't turn back. As Lily continued reading, the book began to reveal the mansion's true purpose. It had once been a place of great power, a sanctuary for those who practiced forbidden magic. The rituals performed within its walls had opened a portal to the spirit world, allowing both the living and the dead to cross freely. Lily's heart pounded as she realized the extent of the mansion's dark history. The visitors who had come in the past had not been mere ghosts, they were trapped souls, drawn to the power of the mansion. The spirits that haunted the house were not only seeking peace, they were seeking release from the ties that bound them to this world. But the book also revealed something else, an ancient ritual that could banish the spirits once and for all. It was dangerous, and it would require a great sacrifice. Lily stood in front of the pedestal, the book open before her, the ritual ready to be performed. She felt the weight of the decision pressing on her shoulders. The power in the room had intensified, and she could feel the spirits watching her, waiting for her to make the final choice. The ritual would end the mansion's curse, but it would come at a great personal cost. To seal the portal forever, Lily would have to offer up a part of herself, a piece of her soul. The sacrifice would free the trapped spirits, but it would leave her forever changed. As the room grew colder, Lily took a deep breath. She knew what she had to do. She had come this far, and she could not turn back now. Slowly, she began to chant the incantation, her voice steady despite the fear rising within her. The shadows around her seemed to recoil, and the room began to vibrate with power. She could feel the spirits pulling away, their voices fading as the portal closed. The mansion's curse was finally ending, and Lily's heart filled with both relief and sorrow. As the final words of the ritual left Lily's lips, the air in the chamber grew still. The vibrations of power faded, and the shadow. For a moment, everything was eerily quiet. Lily stood motionless, her heart racing, waiting for some sign that the ritual had worked. The weight of the book still rested in her hands, its pages now blank. The eerie glow had vanished, leaving only the soft light of her lantern. Then, slowly, the whispering began again. But this time, it wasn't threatening or ominous. It was peaceful, like a soft breeze rustling through the trees. The spirits, freed at last, were no longer trapped in the mansion. They had found their way to the other side, their voices a final expression of gratitude. The mansion itself seemed to exhale, as though a long-held breath had been released. Lily could feel the difference. The oppressive energy that had once lingered in every room was gone. The house was no longer a prison of dark secrets, it had become just a home once again. With the spirits gone, Lily knew her work was done. She took one last look around the underground chamber, now calm and quiet. The stone pedestal, the ancient. She made her way back through the tunnel, her footsteps lighter than before. As she emerged from the darkness, the moonlight welcomed her, casting a gentle glow on her path. The mansion was now just a house, a place filled with memories, not spirits. The next morning, Lily stood outside the mansion, gazing at the once foreboding structure. It no longer seemed as dark or as threatening. There was a warmth to it now, as if the house itself had been reborn. She could hear birds singing in the trees, and the wind rustling through the leaves. It was a peaceful morning, one she hadn't experienced in a long time. The silence that had once been filled with whispers was now filled with life. Lily knew that her journey had changed her forever. The house had become a part of her, just as she had become a part of it. It was no longer a place of fear, but a place of healing and renewal. As the days passed, Lily felt a sense of connection to the mansion and its history. The secrets she had uncovered, the spirits she had freed, and the journey she had taken all had a profound impact on her. She visited the study often, spending time among Edwin's old books and notes. Although Edwin was gone, his presence remained in the house no longer as a ghost, but as a part of the place itself. Lily often found herself speaking to him as though he were still there, sharing her thoughts and experiences with him. The mansion was no longer a lonely, haunted place. It had become a living, breathing part of Lily's life. The whispers were gone, but the bond between the house and her was stronger than ever. One night, as Lily sat in the study, the moonlight shining through the window, she felt a strange warmth wash over her. She turned to look at the chair where Edwin used to sit. There, for the briefest of moments, she thought she saw his figure just a shadow in the dim light, but there nonetheless. The figure smiled at her, a soft, reassuring smile. Lily's heart swelled with a mix of emotions: grief, love, and peace. The spirits of the mansion had been freed, but Edwin's spirit had stayed behind, not as a visitor, but as a guide. Lily knew that she wasn't alone. The mansion had given her more than she could have ever imagined. It had given her closure, strength, and the gift of understanding. As the figure faded into the shadows, Lily whispered a quiet thank you. And with that, the house was finally at peace. Weeks passed, and Lily found herself adapting to her new life in the mansion. The once eerily quiet halls were now filled with a peaceful atmosphere, and each room seemed to breathe with life. There was no longer the sense of something watching her, no more whispers in the dark. The house had become a sanctuary. Lily spent her days tending to the garden and exploring the grounds. The mansion, though large and old, had become a place of warmth. The air was fresh, and the once dark corners now felt inviting. It was as if nature itself had reclaimed the land, pushing out the shadows that had once lurked there. She felt a sense of accomplishment, knowing that she had brought peace not only to herself but to the spirits that had once haunted this place. Her mind was at ease, and her heart felt lighter with each passing day.